Yep, apologies for the clickbaity title, but you really want to make sure that you grease your implements every 10 hours. If you have a Kubota 23BX, there are 35 grease fittings you have to grease every 10 hours of use. I personally don't keep track of how long I've used each implement, but every 10 hours on my meter, I just grease them both, the front end loader and the backhoe. Metal moving and rubbing against metal is not a good thing, so you want to make sure that all of these joints are really well lubricated. You'll find a grease nipple or a Zerk fitting at every important intersection that has to be greased regularly. I consider these Zerk fittings a consumable item, and I have a box of replacements because I've had to replace a few on the tractor already. But a little bit more about that at the end of the video, and you especially want to watch it if you're a new tractor owner. The Zerk fitting has a spring-loaded ball at the end that keeps the fitting sealed. Pressure from the grease gun forces the ball back and allows the grease to flow through the fitting. The way it works is pretty simple actually. Everywhere there's a joint, there's one of these steel pins that holds the hinge together. There's a hollow channel that is machined down the center of the pin. The Zerk fitting is screwed onto the end of this pin, and that's where the grease goes in. You'll notice a groove in the middle of this pin, and there's a little hole, and that's where the grease comes out that you press in from the end of the pin. The groove serves to hold a little bit of extra grease. Depending on where the fitting is, they tend to get impacted with a lot of dirt. I bought these plastic covers to keep the dirt out because you really don't want any of the sand or abrasive material pushed in when you add the grease. But to be honest, they're pretty useless, and I gave up on most of them. To get the grease inside the fitting, you're going to need a grease gun. They come in all shapes and sizes. The one on the left is used with one hand, the one on the right requires two hands, and there's even ones that are electric, but they're pretty expensive. My preference and the one I use is the one on the right, but it's a two-handed affair, and it allows me to add quite some pressure. Most grease guns come with a pretty lousy fitting at the end, and I suggest that you replace them with a lock and lube fitting. I'm not sponsored, I paid for mine fair and square, but they really make a difference. And oh yeah, they cost almost as much, if not more, than the grease gun. So let's go add some grease to the tractor. Firstly, you want to make sure that the area is pretty clean, free of dirt and dust and sand, because that grease is going to push that sand in, and that's really not good for any moving parts. No matter how neat you are, grease is a messy thing. I don't clean the grease after I've applied it. I actually clean the area before I apply the new grease. I find this works best for me. Once the area is clean, it's pretty simple. Just clip the grease gun onto the end of the grease fitting, and then use the handle on your grease gun to force the grease in. Depending on which joint you're lubricating, 2, 3, or 4 pumps should do. You know you're doing it right when grease starts to ooze out of the joint, and you know you've done enough when it starts to ooze out of the other end of the joint too. Let's go figure out where all the grease fittings are. There are 22 fittings on the backhoe, there are 12 on the front end loader, and there's one hidden right in the middle of the tractor. There are 4 on each stabilizer outrigger for a total of 8. There are 4 grease points at the end of the dipper stick where it meets the bucket. There are 3 at the elbow where the dipper meets the boom. The cylinder that raises and lowers the boom has 2 grease points, and the point where it hinges has 1. The last 4 grease points on the backhoe lubricate the boom swinging left and right. There's one at the end of the cylinder where it attaches to the boom, and there's another one hidden back here where it attaches to the frame. The points where the boom pivots has 2 grease points. One is easily accessible up here. The other one is tucked away over here underneath the hydraulic lines, and you're going to have to move them to get the grease gun to fit. That's it. Those are the 22 points on the backhoe that you need to grease. Now let's go take a look at the grease points for the front end loader. I've removed the bucket for easier access, and some of the grease points are far more easily accessible if you raise the main frame. There are a total of 12 grease points on the front end loader. There are 3 Zerks on each side that raise and lower the main frame. 1 at the pivot point and 1 at each end of the cylinder. There are 3 identical points on the other side, bringing the total to 6. It's easiest to grease all of these with the front end loader in the raised position. There's a grease point at the end of each arm where the quick attach bucket holder connects to the main frame, bringing the total to 8. There is a Zerk at each end of the cylinder that tilts the bucket. 1 here and 1 here. The pins that lock the bucket to the quick attach frame also need lubrication, and there's 1 on each side, bringing the total to 12. The final grease point, and the one I usually forget, is to lubricate the forward and reverse pedals, and it's located under a rubber flap on the floor. That's it, you're done, and that'll keep your implements in tip-top shape. One more little word of advice, especially if your tractor is new. The Zerk fittings are actually painted when the tractor is painted, and sometimes, if the dealer doesn't check it, they could actually be sealed, and the grease will not go into the fitting. Just be really careful and inspect them carefully. You can either replace the Zerk, or if you have the time, you can scrape it off. Now get out there and enjoy your tractor. Thanks for watching.